Hello and welcome to Shusaku review number 37. Today we have a game against Yasui Sanchi. This is one of the castle games that was played in 1851, and this is kind of an extra special game. It's what was called an o-konomi game, which means it was an unscheduled castle game that was requested specifically by the shogun. So it's pretty cool. I'll probably have more commentary about the players a little bit later, but for now let's actually just jump straight into the game, because this is going to be a special one, quite unlike the games we've been seeing recently, because Yasui Sanchi decides to just start fighting immediately in this game. And the commentary, which was by Sanno Hirotaka, basically mentioned that it was known that the Fuseki was kind of the weak point for Sanchi, and so maybe he figured, what's the point? Let's just start a fight right away. And so that's what he does. So this is going to be a fun one. And black decides to respond with the 3-space low pincer. Playing an open corner is definitely possible, but it seems like this was quite a popular move at the time. And then white goes straight into sort of the taisha variation. So we saw this sort of thing last game, actually, where Shusaku avoided the taisha, if you remember, because of this helping stone. And well, it was actually a helping stone for white in that other game, but in this case, black's ready for the fight. Right, we have this L17 stone, which is only gonna help us compared to the usual taisha, and so we get into this sort of thing. So white, there's weak stones on the outside, but the first thing to take care of is the weak stones on the inside, right? They're surrounded and need help, so we go for the Sansan, which is going to give us a lot of help for the group, and is also going to put pressure on these stones for black. There's a couple possibilities here, but Shusaku plays the Hane, which basically makes one exchange, and then jumps out here. Black obviously has weakness, but white is pretty weak as well. So black can afford to make this jump, and then white's going to continue taking care of the inside weak group. Capturing this stone would be too small. Black could just give that away, and then basically just be strong on the outside. So white slides here, which is threatening to come through kind of this thin large knights shape, right? So black answers. White connects on the outside. This is getting ready to come in more strong, right? Like push and cut. But black can fix the cut by connecting this stone. And so this is a sort of joseki. And now Sanchi decides to leave this for now and plays in the corner. And the commentator disagreed with this for a couple of reasons. First, he felt this was the wrong move in the corner. Maybe we can just take a look at what happens first. So black comes into the corner, white plays here, and then black just kind of plays like the normal attach and extend to take the points in the corner. And so the commentator felt like white is basically developing towards the wrong area. So maybe he felt like that would help in this fight against black stones on top. But the reality is black's getting profit in the corner, and it's not really like these stones aren't going to die, right? It's not clear that there's going to be a great attack, so he felt this just wasn't worth it for white, and that basically white was developing stones in the wrong direction. So he felt like if white wants to play away from the fight in the top right, he can play a 4-4, which would be reasonable, or it seemed like he really liked 3-3 the most. And his idea was if black approaches like this, then white can just answer calmly. And this is fine, right? Because white is getting points in this case versus the game where black's getting the points. And white also has like sliding moves like A, which means black's not going to get carried away on top in terms of points. And then he also pointed out that black approaching in this way would be a mistake because just this normal follow-up of pushing once and then sliding under is kind of going to frustrate this area for black. It's hard to build that way. And then the last point, which I thought this was actually the most interesting variation, he mentioned that it might just be best for white to continue. So we kind of started this Taisha fight, right? And white is settled in the corner for now, but we have the 3 stones on the outside, which are weak, but are separating black's, 2 potentially weak groups. So to continue, white could play here. This is sort of a vital point to keep black low while gaining some strength for white. Black doesn't want to push from behind for too long, right? So he's going to slide here. And now white can occupy sort of the vital point in this shape. This ends up being a move around here for black or for white ends up being pretty critical in terms of just the balance of power in this fight. So keep this diagram in your mind because we'll compare it later. And then black could play something like this or like this. Both of those would be sort of like Joseki moves. And this is just like a very big Joseki that we have in the top right there. So maybe that would be the proper way to continue now that white started that fight. But in any event, he decides to play the 5-4 point, and black just comes in and takes the points immediately. And now black has Sente, right? And so he's going to use that for the fight. I guess it's worth maybe noting that a lot of times in this sort of Joseki, black would play another move to finish it off, but this is strong enough for now. It just means white's going to have a forcing move later, which we'll see. So black's going to follow up in the corner, and then he's going to take the vital point in the center. And so now the picture is very different, right? Black is one move ahead in the fight. And so although white kind of started the game by saying, hey, let's fight, black is kind of taking control of the fight at this point. 3 inside stones need to come out. And so white plays here. It was interesting, so the commentator noted that it doesn't really make sense to play here anymore because this move sort of assumes that white's going to make some exchanges, and then the next move is going to be around A, which is what we saw, right? But that's not going to work anymore because black already got that move in the way. So white resorts to something like this, right? Because if he does this, there's not really like a next move, right? This is going to be too constrained. So he just comes out, which then gives black that vital point, sort of threatening to come through this knight's move here. And white makes the dog's face strong shape. And this is also looking at weaknesses, right? So there's like an attachment here. There's also like a peep there. So black wants to take care of that. He blocks. White extends here, and now this is an interesting choice. So black plays this move, which puts a lot of pressure on white's cornerstones. White has to answer that, obviously. And then black blocks once more. But the pro mentioned that normally this is the correct shape. So black would play here, nice and solid. And the reason that it's normally the correct shape is it allows black to make good eye shape later. So if black kicks here, white needs to respond passively here. We'll see why in a second. And then this is sente, so we're getting eye shape here, right? And then A is also sente. So basically this move in a normal situation will yield a lot of eye shape later, which is a big deal in a fight, right? If we have like a sente eye, maybe like an eye and a half, that is a huge difference in the health of our group, and so that can have a really big impact on the game. So there's a reason white can't play here, which is that basically this is going to result in a ko in this corner. So let's take a look at that. Hane. In this shape, white needs to block because there's not a lot of eye space, so we basically need to like maximize the number of open points here to try and make eyes. But then black plays the vital point. White continues trying to maximize the eye space. Black connects, and now this is like the only move we can try to make two eyes, but this is going to end up being a ko, right? Because we can't connect here, that's just going to end up being a dead shape. And earlier here, if we try something like this, black has moves to answer this, essentially. It's a little complicated, but basically it's going to be one eye with no way to escape. And so that's why white would have to play like this, which means black gets kind of the eye shape here. But instead, black played here. And it's a good move. So we can take a look at why it's a good move. Let's play white's move first. Basically, there's another ko in this corner now. It's a different ko, with black starting here. And now again, there's not a lot of space in this corner, so white has to try to make the eyes by making kind of this common ko shape. Happens a lot. And so black's going to capture. We can't do this, right? Because black will disconnect, and it's like a 4 eye space. I forget what this one's called actually, but that's going to be a dead shape. And so this is going to be a ko. And black and white could take back and forth while sharing threats. So I'm just going to show the general shape though. We have to defend if we're serious about the ko. And then there's this cut. So black's not strong enough to do this yet, basically. But there's this aji waiting, right? White has to worry about black starting this ko. And basically what it means is a bunch of moves in this area. Like, there's a bunch of moves that are sente. Like even here's sente, for example. So what that means is that because there's this co-potential, there's a bunch of moves in this area during the fighting that are going to be sente for black, which is going to make the fighting much easier for black. And we'll kind of see that later. For now, white makes one exchange. Black answers, otherwise white can jump in and really cause problems for that group, right? So black answers. And believe it or not, the pro felt like the game is already very bad for white. There's a ko waiting in this corner territory, which is not a big territory to begin with, right? Black got the points in the top left, which is a decently sized corner, and these white stones on the outside, it's not clear how much they're going to be worth yet. And then white has this group here, right? So it just seems like black has more profit, and so white plays this aggressive fighting move, and essentially the commentary here was that this is appropriately aggressive in the sense that white needs to try for more. Like, he needs to continue fighting because normal moves aren't going to cut it at this point. But black just answers, kind of normal. We're going to attach and extend to come out and separate the two sides. White takes the vital point, which is also threatening to cut through. So black answers with the bamboo. Now this group is getting very much inside, right? Like surroundable in the next move. So white comes out. It's another dog's face shape here coming out. And black makes this group stronger, comes out this way. Which is getting ready for a stronger attack later on this group, right? White needs to continue coming out. Black answers. And here's where we see the power of this ko that is waiting in the corner, right? So earlier I mentioned there's a bunch of sente moves in this area, and this is one of them. So white does show his strength here. He plays kind of this perfectly timed peep because he needs to live in the top now because of the ko aji, but he's gonna force first. So this is like a force before living sort of exchange. So this is a very well timed peep, which black answers, and then white answers. But let's take a look just so we can see exactly why that's sente. So if white does nothing, now black's going to play that same thing. And then when white comes out, now we have this extra stone here that's helping. So black can Atari, connect, and there's just not enough space for these stones to go anywhere. So the ko is like a very real threat now. So that's why that's sente. And so yeah, white makes this exchange now. If he does this and then later plays A, black might ignore or might counterattack with something like B, might try something different. So this is really nice timing. But then he has to live. And so basically with that move, like, we have a bit of a conclusion to sort of the first fight on the board. It feels like white has had to step back, right? So despite starting this fight, black is the one that has gotten a bit of territory and got an advantage in the fight, in a sense, because white had to come back and defend here. And he's going to continue by attacking on this side, right? This is kind of a common attacking shape here when white has this sort of shape. And not too much white can do here because the A group is still weak, right? So like if we come out with B, which would be like a move to separate, we're going to end up hurting the A group. So white plays this, which was described as extremely submissive but necessary, right? So basically it means that black can gobble this stone up later by forcing, and white's going to be low, but this is kind of white has to just deal with this for right now. And then black decides that these groups are fine for now, and it's time to get back to a big move, like playing a big move, which is going to be an open corner. And he chooses this one. There wasn't any commentary on this, but it is 5-3 point, right? So a little bit of a special move. And a lot of so the default you normally would see, especially during that time, is like a 3-4 point, right? Because they believed that it was like the most valuable move to play in the corner. But in these big fighting games where you have kind of like fights filling out the board before the corners even get played, right? We're at like move 55, or at this point at move 54, we still have two corners open. Now, like, it becomes more interesting because you can see how they choose the corner based on what's on the board. And my interpretation of this stone is black is acknowledging that this group does have some weakness. And so he's not going to do, for example, something like this, where then white can play like approaching moves, right? And get stones in this area, which may be useful for attacking the A group. So, because this 5-3 point, we're going to like approach from this direction probably, right? So more likely that C5 will end up being helpful for the group on top. White decides he wants to continue the attack, and he does so by playing here, which the pro disagreed with. We'll see why. So he says this move is revealed as a bad move in just a little bit here. Yeah, let's look at what happens first, and then we'll go back and see what white could have done instead. Black definitely has some weakness in this area, right? So like there's a peep at A, and then if white gets a stone at A, then he can like push through at B, right? So there's actually like a couple weaknesses here. Black needs to be careful, and so that's why he defends here, trying to just kind of make this area stronger. Then white needs, is coming out with his inside group, so he attaches and extends, and he's kind of trying to like look at all these weaknesses and look at this cut, right? And the reason it becomes a problem is black plays this move, which ends up being a very nice sacrifice. So let's take a look at this. White answers, black cuts, white goes to capture the stone. We extend once, right? So these two stones are going to die, but we extend to get the forcing moves. So white can't remove them off of the board in one move. So white has to answer to keep the stones dead. And then now black gets this Atari. And what that means is that there's no cut at the triangle location anymore, which is like a really big deal in this fight, because now black doesn't have to actually spend a move to fix it. He just gets to continue out. So this flow is really nice, and you can see that kind of like the balance of power is actually shifting against white's group, and black is coming out pretty easily by making this sacrifice. So this is not what white was hoping for. And basically what I mentioned was it's this move's fault right here, that it turned out that way because of this sacrifice, right? So it's because white played this stone, and now because he played that stone, he kind of has to follow up to to do something to make that stone worthwhile. And so instead, what white could consider is to just play here directly and let black connect. And things are a little more vague on top. So now maybe white can decide to do something on top or play from the center and then leave that as kind of like a threat for later. But in any case, black got a bit of momentum here. And so he comes out. White continues escaping. Black plays at kind of like the tiger's mouth vital point, peeping through here. White helps his shape. And then now black's group has some weakness too, right? And so black helps his shape. This is one point where the pro mentioned that this is solid and it's good shape, but this would be too passive, I guess, for Komigo, I think he called it. So if black actually had to pay Komi for white, he felt that black would need to play something like this, like try for a little more. And there's not really much that white can do here, even though there's some thinness here. White's still weak on both sides, right? And even bridging the gap is going to be it's going to take some doing. But in any case, Shusaku doesn't have to worry about Komi, so he just plays here, nice and solid. White makes one exchange here, poking in a little bit, and then decides to take the last open corner by playing here. And then black finishes his corner. And white extends on the left-hand side from the stones he has here, which aren't exactly weak, but there is still some aji for that. So he's making that strong, and he's also saying like, hey, your group on top is getting surrounded. The group does not clearly have two eyes yet, so that's somewhat of a threat. And then this part's a little bit interesting. So black plays here, and this is not like a normal move that you would see, right? It's only, we're seeing this because it's kind of an interesting game where the fights happened first before the corners. But this is not a normal way to approach like a 3-5 point, because white just gets to close the corner. And I think there was one exchange, right? So now black comes through here in Sente, decides he's going to do that, and then he plays here on bottom. And the pro felt this was too good for black. So although this was a weird way to kind of approach this corner, and we're actually just letting white have the corner, this ends up being like perfect for black, basically. And because the thing you have to keep in mind is that white still has the weak B group, and so the feeling is that the side is more important than the corner in this game, because of that. I mean, there's also the fact that this is just kind of like a nice little territorial framework for black on the bottom too. But especially when you take into account the health of the group, the side is more important than the corner. And so he actually felt that means that maybe B was a dubious move. And he thought white could play here, and that this might be best. Which looks a little bit weird, right? But his idea was that now if black plays here, white can develop towards the direction he wants to go, breaking up the bottom, and potentially more help for this group makes it harder for black to attack. And now black needs to figure out what to do in this area, and it's not exactly clear. Like, the feeling was that this is a little bit slow, and so most likely black might try something like this to go for more, which will result in a trade. So we're gobbling these stones up as black, but white gets this, which is very big as well. So this is what he suggested as an alternative for white. But white played a more normal move here. Still keeping an eye on this group, by the way. But once black plays like this and says, no, that's fine, you take the corner, it's going to be, like basically the attack is over on that right side group. And now black has a nice shape on the bottom. And so the only thing that's really in question still for black would be the A group, I guess. And white's not doing too hot on territory, right? If we just kind of scan and compare a little bit. One thing that was interesting here to me is J3. It's very low. And so, in fact, like both of the stones are low. And so, based on what I've sort of been taught in the past, I would have thought, oh, we want to play high, either here or here, to keep more pressure because the attack is important. And I think there's some validity to that idea. But what the pro pointed out is that this makes the sort of invasion probe move for white more effective. We'll see why in a second. We can look at that. So maybe in this case, playing low is more important because it probably depends on the severity of the attack, right? Like if the attack is a very, very sure thing, then maybe playing high is more important. But if it's not particularly severe, then maybe the safer thing to do is to keep more of your eye on the territory. So black plays here. White plays this little probing move. He's basically lending a helping hand to the A stone, threatening to do something with that. Black does respect that. Basically what could happen here is if black doesn't do anything, white has a peep, and then he can start to come out, and he can't get all the stones out, but he doesn't need to save this stone. He can make the tiger's mouth. Black captures, and you can see that sort of this whole group doesn't really have eyes, right? And it's white's move now, and black's group is on the inside. So this doesn't look so good, especially when there's like peeps here. So that's why black respects that move. And now white needs to figure out what to do about the bottom, right? Black has too much territory. And so what he ends up doing is he plays here, which the pro says is this is just not enough. So let's take a look at what happens, and then we can look at some alternatives. Black just answers. So basically attach and then pull back. And he just answers everything here. And so essentially white got some more health for his group, but black just like took all the points, right? And it's basically too much for black was the feeling. And so white needs to figure out something else to do. The problem is like this looks like an overplay, right? Invading here when we have the weak A group. So that's probably not going to fly. If we try to reduce like this more forcefully to give black less points, black will probably answer once just to reduce the severity of white's follow-up. But after that, he's going to come in between, right? He's going to attack and attack. And A is getting very weak and inside, and B hasn't even started getting eye shape yet. So this is going to be pretty unreasonable as well. And so the move that that white can try is this one, this probing move. And so basically the idea here is asking black, like, what are you going to do? And most likely black is going to answer at A or B solidly, right, to give as few forcing moves as possible. If we play a Hane, that is just going to give white more forcing moves that he can use to try and settle or do something with. So let's take a look at B first. If black plays B, then white can switch to here. And if black continues attacking, now white can Hane and make this sort of co-shape. And so this would actually be, white would be actually quite happy with something like this, given the state of the game. The reason being, he can sort of try and settle these groups separately. Obviously both are in contention, but it's not the case where the A and the B groups are so close together that black comes in between and they're like both about to die. I don't feel like I'm expressing that concept that well, but many times when you have two weak groups and they're right next to each other, that's when black can play some sort of separating move that threatens both, right? In this case, there's a little bit of a distance and some space. And so the idea is, maybe we can settle this co-situation without putting our A group in too much danger. So that would be like much preferred over something like this, right, where they're both just quite weak. So that would be one possibility. If black plays the other way, now basically white can live in the corner later. So white can play some sort of reducing move now. And then make an exchange here. And then he can just decide how he wants to continue reducing from the outside. Maybe just like pushing along this line. Because later white can play A and live in the corner, which means it's very different from this situation, right, where black just gets everything. Like if we imagine white can take this corner part, then that reduces the points a lot. But now it's too late, right? Because if we play here, black is just gonna, I'm breaking the tree, of course. But black is just going to answer strongly because he already knows what the situation is. So let's go back and cut that. Last thing to note here is that to kill the corner locally, you would need to play this, but that's going to be too unreasonable in this situation, right? White's going to come out, and this is just going to be a mess. So that's what white could have tried instead. And if we go back to before, where was it? So with the high move, if we do the same thing, that's why this becomes easier, right? Because now this move is threatening to slide under. So we're going to get something free here. Let's just do this really simply. This is not what black would play, obviously, most likely, but now we get something like this, which is a bit easier. We can't, because if we guard from the top, then we can get something like this going, right? It's going to be very easy. So that was the explanation for why A was correct, being low. So we get to here in the game, and let's just take stock of what's going on. So black's got the A group. There's like a specific weakness at this triangle point, but the group itself is reasonably strong, right? Seems like maybe white could come in between here and we might have to live, but A is pretty strong. B is surrounded and doesn't quite have two eyes yet, so we got to worry about that. And then C and D are, clearly just strong with territory. And white's groups are pretty solid at this point now that he's made these exchanges. So basically what I'm getting at is the B group is the weakest now. And if you notice, white just made these exchanges to get these stones in the middle. So now is when he's going to turn and try to attack the B stones. So he comes in and peeps at this cut here. Unfortunately, this does not end up very well. This is not the most effective peep. So black pushes, and white pulls back to try and keep the threat of the peep. Black continues pushing, and then the problem is black has this move, which is threatening to capture these stones. And even answering here is problematic for white. So white answers, and then now black comes back and answers. And the thing is, this exchange keeps things sente, because now black gained a liberty on top, and so the B stones are in trouble, and white needs to do something about that. So he could play here to capture the A stones. He decides to just extend his liberties by playing here instead. And there are some complications with this black group, which we'll see in a little bit. But black does some reading and decides this is good enough. I'm just going to play from my corner, making more points, and possibly lending a helping hand to that group. White makes an exchange here. Black needs to keep the corner strong. White peeps. There's some weaknesses here, right? If we push, there's two cuts, and then there's liberty problems. Black answers on this side. And then we get this double hane. So black's getting more and more points on the bottom, but he's also getting more and more surrounded, right? So now he takes a moment to push, create some weaknesses, cuts. Note this is another one of those cases where the Atari gives white kind of the bad shape, empty triangle here. And then he just comes back and fixes here. And so now we're completely surrounded, right? So we got to see what white can do here. He peeps. Black connects. White extends. So we're really surrounded, and basically we need to make two eyes now. So the first thing black does is places sente exchange here. That was sente to capture 3 stones, so white answers. And now, actually we have this exchange first. So black jumps, white answers, and now black ignores. Ignores again. So he's decided you can't kill this group, so I'm just going to continue playing from the side that gives me more points. So he plays the end game move, and white makes an exchange here, seeing if he can sort of get something going against this A group instead. And then actually, let's go back real quick just to see why black's not dead. So basically, if white wants to kill black, he needs to play here first, right? Because black can play there to make two eyes immediately. So white would have to play here, which black would block, and then white would be forced to play here. So like, just to commence the attack, white has to do this first. So he's like throwing some stones away to make this one eye. And now the question is, can black make the second eye? And we can't make it up here, but black can play here. White's got to remove this eye. Then he can hane, which is sente, against these 4 stones. And then he can play here. And there's no way to remove this eye. Especially considering that these stones have a liberty weakness, right? So if we Atari, it's an eye. This sort of thing is not going to work. Actually, that's not how we would answer that, is it? We can do something like this. We can Atari first. And then come out. So that's going to be an eye. So basically black is good here. And so white makes these exchanges instead. And now it comes back over to hane. But black is able to play the strong response. He plays here saying, you still can't kill me, and I'm coming into your territory. And now white tries something in the corner. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work. So black extends. White plays here. Vital point in the corner. Black or white is basically, poking at black's shape to see if he can get anything done. Black plays the solid move here in sente, and then plays here, and this is basically like AB Miai. Black's going to be just fine. And in fact, the pro mentioned that this loses a point compared to the usual endgame sequence here, which would be this one. Which black needs to answer like this. And then white has hane and connect, and black has to connect. So this would actually be better for points for white. So white's looking for something, but he's actually losing more points in the process. And then it was mentioned that this move is only correct when white can play this move and kill. So in this sort of shape, black's going to try and make the eye, which then white can jump into and pull back. And if there were less liberties, this could be a thing. But in this case, black has too many liberties. He can just come in, and he's going to be able to live here just fine. So basically, this doesn't work for white. So now white comes back and plays this exchange. And black says, okay, you took those points away. I'm going to, treat this situation seriously. I just need to make sure this group's okay. So I'll make shape here. This is like almost a shared dog's face shape, right? So white playing here would be the dog's face, and then black playing here is as well. White kind of tests black's defenses once or twice more. Black just answers here solidly, and white resigns the game at this point. So he doesn't actually even try to kill this black group in the center. He's convinced that it's alive. And this was just way too much territory on the bottom, right? The game was kind of difficult already. We can take a look at the fight for this group now that this exchange has been made. It plays out similarly. So we still have to do this first. And black can still do this. White needs to come in. Things are a little different here now, though. The only move white really has here to make this not an eye is this one. Black can come out. These stones are becoming a problem now, so we need to try and connect. This move, unfortunately, is Sente, though, to get eyes. So white's gotta connect. And black can force white down to the first line here. And there's probably a couple moves here that work, but black can just wedge in. And now there's no way to save everything, right? Like, this isn't going to work because black can just Atari and then throw in. And this also isn't going to work. We can connect, and now A and B are Miai. So basically, if white goes all out here, he's going to lose some of his own stones. He's not going to kill black. And so that was the game. Pretty interesting one, right? Having a fight right at the very beginning. And there was a comment about Yasui Sanchi's play. Basically, they said that he did not fare well against Shusaku, but other than that, actually, his career record in the Castle games was really respectable. He had 22 wins, 18 losses, and 2 Jigo, and that's including all his games against Shusaku. And because he was such a strong fighter, they said that if it wasn't for the presence of a player like Shusaku that he played several times, who had the ability to kind of put a damper on his fighting ability, his record would have been a lot better. Basically, because Shusaku was able to contain the aggression and kind of fluster his style. Let's take one round through here again. I think we looked at everything. Yes, we did. Cool. Yeah, so just going through the flow of the game one more time. So we had kind of the Taisha variation where we had the 3-space slow pincer move already in there. And then we had white's decision to play away, right? And so black got to scoop up some points. And so he's like taking profit first and then getting the key moves in the fight, right? This is a key move in the fight. This is a key move in the fight. So this really worked out well for him, especially with this sharp move, where they're both sort of reading that ko. And so, white just had to try even harder at that point, but Shusaku just slow and steady. White eventually has to, pay the debt up here. And so at some point, it's like the attack, almost turned against white, and black is picking up points in the meantime. White tries again, but this sacrifice stone, or 2 stones there, protected against the cut, so black gets the momentum in the fight again. and just kind of plays straightforward from there very solidly, right? This is interesting, being willing to give the corner away for what's more important, which is the side in this case. And then we saw here where white needed to try for more, unfortunately. His group is weak, but this just giving black all of the territory without trying to do some sort of probe here first, that was just too much. Maybe Sanchi felt like he was going to get something more against the A group after he got these stones. Maybe that's why he was willing to try that, but just didn't work out, unfortunately. Yeah, so that was pretty much it for this game. Cool. And then I will be doing another shorter video for the sort of extra game that I mentioned. I haven't forgot about that. It's the one that doesn't have Shusaku playing in it, but I'll do a quick one for that. And then the next official game is going to be Castle game number 7. And that's probably going to be a longer one because the commentary is done by Miyamoto Naoki, and he loves to put many, many diagrams and to be really, really thorough. So those end up being really interesting and fun ones, although a bit longer. So we'll see how long it takes me to prep for that. But yeah, that's it for this. That's it for this one. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.